Today we're very pleased to be here with Guy Nicholson, who is the parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party, and today's interviewing panel is Ashley and Stephen. And without any further ado, I shall let them commence.
Our first question is on housing.
Oh yeah.
How can we ever make housing genuinely affordable for the local people?
I think it's quite straightforward. The housing needs of the local community fall into a number of different categories. One of them is affordability. Sometimes that's an affordable rent for some. For others, it might be about affordable ownership. It could be shared ownership, for example. So it comes along in various different shapes and forms. There is every need to ensure that the homes that are being built locally, first and foremost, fulfil our local housing needs. And that is not what's being served at the moment. That's not what's happening. So at the moment, the market is building lots and lots of new homes for those that can pay the price for them. And that is not meeting the housing needs first and foremost. The approach that should be taken is to first of all meet the needs of the local community, and then anything that's left over can then go to the market and people can either buy or they can rent as they see fit beyond the community. But the first thing that must happen is to fulfil our housing needs. For some that's downsizing, smaller home. For some it's a larger home, growing family perhaps. For some it's that first step into a home of your own, basically, whether that's renting a home or whether that's buying a home. And none of this is really being fulfilled with the house building programme that's happening. So we would use government to do a couple of things. First thing would be to make sure that there's legislation in place that means that those of us who live locally have first refusal on the new homes that are being built, for example. That we would also bring forward a house building programme that would include affordable homes to rent, affordable homes to buy. And that would be, by the end of the next Parliament, something in the region of 200,000 new homes each year across the whole of the country, not all in Sittingbourne and not all in Sheffield. With that kind of ambition, we can bring forward the homes of tomorrow for you guys to set up your home.
Next question, still on housing. There appears to be a disparity in the way repairs and maintenance are handled in relation to council housing, favouriting those that don't look after their properties over those who do. What can be done to rectify this?
I'm not so sure that's true. I'm not quite sure what evidence you have that supports that, because I'm sure that if we had, for example, the main social housing provider that is looking after what used to be all of Swale Borough Council's council housing. So if we had Amicus Horizon here, I'm sure they would want to respond to that question that you've just made, and they would be far better equipped to respond to it than I. And I'm sure they would say something very similar to what I'm about to say, which is that's untrue. And that they make sure that they treat all tenants fairly and equally, and that they make sure that those homes that those tenants are living in are fit for purpose, well looked after, and all of the equipment that is the landlord's responsibility, things like sewage, things like drainage and hot water, things like central heating, things like that, are all in good working order. You would have to take that question to Amicus Horizon to get a more sort of fuller and more direct response.
The next question is on education. We all look into go to education, both of us. What's your personal opinion on tuition fees?
Tuition fees?
Yeah.
Well, it's quite straightforward. They were put up by this government, and the Labour government after May the 7th will reduce them back down to £6,000.
Fair enough. Still on education, we have a significant growth in our population over recent years, and with local school places in such high demand. What could be done to alleviate the situation?
To provide more school places is to be able to deal with the demand of a growing community in terms of sort of secondary schools and primary school provision. Thank you. Two things. Perhaps if I start from the premise of where a Labour government would take forward education policy, we're not going to change the curriculum again. Okay? We're just going to leave all of the changes that this government has brought in around the curriculum just to continue for the time being. There will come a moment in the future where we can all sit down and review that. Where the concentration now needs to be is supporting teachers teach. Supporting teachers deliver excellent education. And teachers at the moment are having a pretty hard time of it for all sorts of reasons. One of them is to do with the changes around the curriculum, but also it's a whole new culture brought in by this government around the profession of teaching. And that culture is working against the best interests of yourselves as students and against the best interests of the future prospects of a community, a growing community. So we will invest into frontline teaching. We will say about free schools, those free schools that have opened under this government's initiative remain open, continue, but no more new free schools. Okay? So that's it. That money will be used instead and redirected back into the education sector. It will be used to invest into teachers, supporting head teachers and their staff, take forward and rebuild higher standards in education, greater levels of achievement and attainment. But we will also use it to expand the school estate too. So where there is a demonstrable need for new school places, like the kind of need that we're experiencing at the moment, then we will champion Sittingbourne as a place for investment in terms of new school places. But what I should point out is that at the moment we have an academy, a brand new academy on the Isle of Sheppey, and still around 35% of the young people going to secondary school who live on the Isle of Sheppey are being bussed off the island every day to come to the school in and around Sittingbourne. Until that school can get on its feet properly and deliver excellent education so that parents have confidence in the standards and quality of that school, and this net outward flow of students stops, and that we use the capacity on the island, then we've got to address that first before we start arguing for more resources.
The next one is on transport. What measures might be put in place to deal with the rising numbers of potholes, hazardous footpaths, air quality and noise pollution generated by traffic?
I would call, in the first instance, that we use the offices of an MP to bring together a group of like-minded individuals from different parts of our community with different experiences around transport and transportation and the use of the public highway. And we start to bring forward a coherent plan for the future of transport in our community. At the moment, it is appalling what's going on. At the moment, there is very little, almost negligible safe cycling routes, for example. So I have residents talking to me about how can we change that? How can we improve the transport network so that you can use the transport network safely if you're using a bicycle? And people want to use a bicycle for all sorts of different reasons. They want to use it to go to and from school. They want to use it to go to and from college. They want to use it to go to the shops and go and buy something on the high street, or go pop round to the supermarket around the corner and go and grab something. People want to use it to go to work. Some people just want to do it because it's healthy. And we have some of the highest levels of ill health in Sittingbourne and Sheppey, in the southeast of England, and indeed, unfortunately, than anywhere else in England. Ill health. And one way of improving our general health is to encourage things like walking and cycling. That is a very simple way of improving our health and well-being. But there is no provision for safe walking or for safe cycling on our public transport network. The bus services, infrequent and unreliable at the best of times, and not actually fulfilling the needs of public transport for a local community. So again, we would use government to ensure that local communities, such as those that we find in our villages, those that we find in our town centres, both on Sheppey and around Sittingbourne, can have a greater say into the contracts and the planning of bus routes and the delivery of bus services, for example. So they don't all finish at 6:30 in the evening, just at the time when people are starting to leave work to make their way back home. And those kind of things, really sensible. looking at our railways and how we can increase and maximise the opportunities for travel and transportation around our rail network. We're lucky, we've got a local rail line. Okay, it connects Sittingbourne to Sheerness, and there are a couple of stations along its route. It doesn't exactly sort of network and spread out across the whole of the Isle of Sheppey and everywhere around Sittingbourne. But nevertheless, we have a local rail line. Really valuable, a really useful asset to have. It's a very popular service. Let's make it more popular. Let's get more people out of cars and onto the highways on foot, on public transport, on bicycles. And let's start to reduce the impact of vehicle movements, which then reduces things like air pollution, and it starts to have less of an environmental impact. There's one other thing to throw into all of this, if I may. And that is, at the moment, our economic regeneration strategy for our communities seems to centre around yet more logistical distribution hubs, and logistics parks. So where are all these 40-foot trucks going then? Because these 40-foot trucks are plying backwards and forwards on our already overcrowded road network. And this is another problem. So we're going to have 400 jobs on the Isle of Sheppey. Fantastic. I just hope and pray these are good jobs, and these jobs are good paid, well-paid jobs. But this new employment opportunity is because we're getting a new distribution hub for a major supermarket chain in the UK. So yet more truck movements plying their way on and off the Isle of Sheppey, plying their way through the local road networks, both in Sittingbourne and on the island. Again, we've got to think very carefully, is this the future that we want to hand on to you guys? Basically a giant logistics park? No. It's important. Logistics are an important part of our economy, don't get me wrong. They're a vital part of the transportation network and that making sure our economy works. But to build our local economy exclusively around the motor car, exclusively around 40-foot trucks, is not the route to follow. We need a more diverse, a more thoughtful plan for the future of our local economy and the jobs that come with it.
Next question is on transport. With a renewed commitment to upgrade Stockview Roundabout and lacklustre support from Kent Highways to pursue the completion of the Northern Relief Route, should this remain a Swale Council priority? And if so, what benefits would it bring exactly?
I find it extraordinary that here we are 5 years down the line and all that has been achieved is a commitment to do something to a roundabout stuck underneath a motorway. That's it. A commitment. No one's writing the cheque. It's not like, the security vans turning up at the town with bags of gold saying, there you go, boys, go and get on with it. None of that is happening. All it is, it's a commitment to think about doing it and finding some money for it at some point in the future. That is an unacceptable proposition. We have no voice in Westminster. If we had had a voice in Westminster, that project would be happening, as would the Northern Relief Road. The Northern Relief Road, you want to build logistics parks? You want to build distribution hubs? Our industry, as it stands at the moment, is already choking up the existing sections of the Relief Road and the rest of the network associated with it. The Northern Relief Road should have been built years ago, and it should be built now. And Swale Borough Council, led by a Labour group, would fight very hard for that investment and would realise it and bring it forward. So, as Team Labour, in Sittingbourne and Sheppey, we want the Northern Relief Road to happen, and we would bring government to the table to make sure it does happen. And we would go one step further than just a commitment, and we would realise the investment to deal with that particular roundabout and the connections onto the motorway itself.
This, again, the last one, transport. What can be done to improve public transport, given that local bus services are being cut?
The Labour Party in government said very clearly, and forgive me for repeating myself, I think I put it into an earlier answer, which is that we would enable local communities, whether they're village-based or town-based, to have a far, far greater control and influence over public transport contracts. And by that, we're talking about contracts for bus services. So that includes things like hours of operation, it includes things like frequencies, But there is one thing that I must say, must stress, is that when we have bus routes that are affordable, And regular, frequent and appropriate, needed bus routes, basically. When we have them, please, 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 everybody, use them.
Okay. Next question is on economy. What might you be able to do to support local business?
Oh, lots of things, lots of things. So whether we're talking about our local businesses on the high streets, whether we're talking about our local businesses that are based on the various industrial estates scattered around Sittingbourne, and those that are emerging in other parts of the constituency. A Labour government would automatically freeze business rates for all businesses for up to 2 years. And whilst those business rates are frozen, we would bring forward the legislation, which this government has been very reluctant to do so, that would review the whole business rate structure and system with the view to reducing the burden of business rates on small and medium-sized businesses. And the reason for that is that we believe that by supporting our small and medium-sized businesses in our local economies, they are the engine behind the bigger economy, the nation's economy. It's good for us locally, and so when I talk to a local businessman who is based on Sittingbourne High Street, and he tells me that he's paying out something in the region of £12,000 a month on business rates, just think what he could do if A, we froze it, so no more increases, and B, we then set about reducing it. I don't know about how much, we'll see as the work is done in the year ahead, but we reduce it, even if we reduce it by 10%, that's more money that that man has to invest into his business, to increase the scale of his business, create more local jobs, and on the high street, more footfall. That's good for other businesses too, not just his business. But it's that kind of thing. But I would also go a step further and start sort of looking locally about the future of our local economy and what that local economy will look like. I'm not convinced that relying exclusively on distribution centres is the future of our economy. I'd be far rather that we were more ambitious than that we look towards those places where businesses and industry is already functioning and what those businesses are, what those industries are. I look to Queenborough and see pharmaceuticals. You look around Redden Dock, for example. You also look to Queenborough and you see a fishing fleet. Fantastic asset, an inshore fishing fleet. Do you know how many cockles, tonnage, in season that fleet bring in? A week? No? Between 8 and 10 tons of cockles are brought in by that fleet in season every week. And they all go off to Belgium to market. The whole lot, which is great for them because they're getting top dollar for them. But the point I'm making here is that's an asset, that's an economic asset. There's a supply chain around that fleet, not just with cockles, but with the fish too. And that supply chain is as much about engineers who keep the boats working and the engines ticking over, as it is about wholesaling, distribution of fresh fish. Somebody's got to sell it, somebody's got to get it ready for market, get it sorted out, filleted, gutted, all of that kind of stuff. Fantastic opportunities there. Pharmaceuticals, I mentioned, the pharmaceutical sector. There is an industrial scaled production line for pharmaceuticals, which do include things like shampoo and conditioner, okay? Yeah, but they also include the manufacture of HIV treatments for use in this country and for export. Now that is serious manufacturing going on. So why aren't we looking at taking advantage of what we have? And I tell you now, all right, that any community would give their right arm to have a deep water port, a railhead connected to a high-speed rail line, and dual carriageway connectivity to the nation's motorway network. They would give their right arm for those opportunities. They're the catalysts of tomorrow, and they're being squandered at the moment, all of them.
Now it's on local facilities. What facilities would you provide that will benefit the local community, especially younger people?
It's interesting. I've just had a long conversation with somebody in their home about the lack of support, the lack of opportunity, the lack of provision, the lack of imaginative, creative provision for younger people growing up in Sittingbourne and in Sheppey as we speak. I think there is a great potential a great potential to unlock some fantastic opportunities. I'm heavily involved in the arts. The arts in themselves are have a fantastic set of activities. It's a portfolio of activities that really connect for some of us. Some of us are interested in music, some of us are interested in performance, some are interested in painting, sculpture, printing, design, fashion, and so the list goes on and on and on. And all of those sorts of opportunities can be brought about. But then for others, it's nothing to do with that. For others, it might be something more physical. It might be about sport, for example, or a particular discipline within sport. For others, you know what? It might be learning about the wild spaces that we live alongside of. And it might be about working in those wild spaces, caring for those wild spaces, caring for the environment. For others, it might be about growing things. Growing things. We've got an extraordinary community of farmers and growers. Most incredible community doing extraordinary things with the land. All of these different activities are going on around us, and there's nothing connecting us all up. Connecting you up with those activities if that's what you wanted to go and do. There aren't those mentors there. All of this sounds a bit boring and a bit techy and a bit kind of dry, doesn't it? But I don't mean it that way. If you can get that organisation bit right, if you can get that network of like-minded men and women coming together and providing those doorways to those kind of activities within our community, then that will start to address this sort of real concern that actually there's little to do. There is no coherent youth service. There is no investment for a youth service. All of these things that seem to be sort of thrown up in your way, and you've got to kind of sort your own life out one way or another, either successfully or not, yeah? I think that's rubbish. I mean, that's sort of really kind of sort of, you know, that's really lazy actually. And actually you think, look, there are a great many people of all ages out there in our community already. Just need the opportunity to come together, talk about these opportunities and work out how we can connect us all up with these various different opportunities. And do you know what? I reckon we get it right, it'll happen easy.
Okay. Next question is in general now. If there was one thing you'd like to achieve in Sitterbourne area during your term as RMP, what would it be?
One thing I'd like to achieve, actually it's all about you guys actually. And it's all about your generation. So one thing, I'm going to cheat slightly and say, actually, it's about your chances, your opportunities as you grow up and as you reach, well, you're already adult, but you know, when you reach adulthood. So when you're into your 20s, yeah, there it is, the world's your oyster. Now to do that, you need to do lots and lots of different things. It's like a big sort of kind of recipe. In a sense, it's never one thing. It's about lots of different things all happening in parallel. And really successful regeneration sees the world in that way. Regeneration is not about bricks and mortar. They're one small ingredient in it, but they are not about bricks and mortar. And where I really fear things are at the moment is that we have a market-led so-called regeneration. And market-led regeneration focuses on nothing other than bricks and mortar. And all of those other things, those things about people, individuals, about character, about activities and different activities, the very fabric that when it's put together creates that golden thread that runs through our lives. When you bring all of that together, it's far, far more exciting, far more invigorating. And I always sort of say that, look, politics are people. That's what the ancient Greeks used to define politics as. It's people. And people are politics. You take people out of politics, you try and treat it in a rather dry, technical, processy thing, then it disconnects and it has no purpose. And that's when we will start calling into question the validity of politics. It's when that happens, that disconnect takes place. So think people, think politics, and then we'll pull the levers, yeah, and we can do it all together. And we use Westminster to do that. We use the Borough Hall to do that. We use County Hall to do that. We use our business community to do that. We use our levers and we bring people together. And what better way than you guys leading that charge?
The next question is, who's your favourite musical group or artist and why?
Oh gosh. Oh well, I like all sorts actually. I like classical, I like opera, I like symphonies, I like concertos, I like Coldplay, I like, actually this is when people that sort of kind of family start to cringe a bit. I do like things like Genesis. I do, I like good music actually. Is what I really enjoy. I worked in the theatre industry. And I worked on many different types of sort of productions, ranging from musicals, where there's some fantastic, fantastic music. Rodgers and Hammerstein and those American musicals, really clever stuff, beautifully, beautifully composed. Very, 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 very clever lyrics too. Through Andrew Lloyd Webber and his early work, and an incredible mix. And on into opera. So I worked on operas written by people like Verdi and Puccini and Tchaikovsky in one case, actually, all sorts. So a very broad experience, and then into ballet too, and I worked on a number of ballets, and that was sort of very much, again, about sort of fantastic music put to dance, expressing character, expressing emotion through dance. I'm not really a dancer, I'm not good at that bit, but all of these different music forms, there's a common thread that runs through them all, actually. And I think, and this is the thing that really sort of kind of, I think, gets me going. Particularly, I like some of Bob Dylan's things. There are one or two Bob Dylan songs that can make me cry. But so there is pieces in operas that make me cry, too. I think music is an incredibly, incredibly powerful medium to express emotion. I can't play music, I'm not a musician, but I can listen to it. And I respond to it emotionally, and that I think is the wonderful thing about music, whether it's contemporary or classical. And I do like some of the newer stuff too, but I just can't remember all that. But there's some of it's really good actually. It's really good stuff, and I think again it's this thing where you get real creativity, people creating, writing, producing this sort of kind of these noises, and it's so special. And I think music's very powerful.
Next question to the
Are you thinking about sort of getting a kind of I can see it now. Forget about what's the festival in the Isle of Wight called? I can't remember what it's called now. Whatever it's called. But I can see it now. The Isle of Sheppey. So I can see I can see what's going through your minds actually.
The next question is in general still. Outside of politics, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Oh, I actually one of the things I really enjoy doing is growing things. Actually, I enjoy that, and I tend to grow wilder gardens rather than sort of heavily manicured gardens. And one of the reasons for that is that I've always had a long interest in things like insects, butterflies, moths, and everything. I keep bees. So you sort of so I tuck into the honey. It's a purely selfish exercise, I hasten to add. But it's sort of, and so for me that world is a really kind of calming and relaxing world. So at some ridiculous hour this morning, I was sort of somewhat tempted to, almost in the dressing gown, sort of kind of, sort of put on some gloves and pull some nettles out from the patch, because there were too many nettles. I've left some in, so there's still some nettles there, and I think I enjoy that. I enjoy the natural world, and I enjoy particularly that sort of idea of growing things and nurturing things. I'm also I do tend to go around the world collecting seeds and things and then trying to germinate them, and I'm sure that's probably highly illegal, but I promise I only do it within the European Union.
The final question is, what is your favourite shop in Sittingbourne?
Oh, well, actually, do you really want to know, actually?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's Rob's the Butcher's. Oh. Yeah, it is. Both for the meat and the stuff that, we're selling to cook, but I'm also quite partial to that kind of counter at the end, which a various selection of goodies. I love the Red Lion actually. I really like that, and it's lovely food. I really like that, and I know there are lots of other good places along the high street, but I think perhaps for me they stand out. I really enjoy the flower shop, and I enjoy the gardening sort of kind of just about Peppercorn. Well, it is on the high street. But, so I do like that. I think that But you see, it goes back to what we were talking about. There's some sort of real assets that actually, given the opportunity, given the space and the encouragement, could set about transforming our high street. So suddenly it becomes a place that you do want to go to. You do want to go and meet friends. You know, you might want to go and buy goods and services. I mean, Wilko's fantastic. It's great, and it's a god-awful building, but it's a great inside. It's fantastic. You know, you couldn't ask for more. You know, it's fantastic. And so you just sort of feel that actually the high street in Sittingbourne, it's undervalued. And I think that if a council's going to spend £3 million on so-called town centre regeneration, you don't spend it on a multi-storey car park. You don't spend it on building, 150 new flats or something, whatever it is they're all about to do. You don't sort of talk about, we're going to build a cinema, we haven't got anyone to run it, when just further down the high street, there is an entrepreneur who has reopened our cinema and is just, and as a community, we're all responding to it and going to watch films there. And actually, that business model could work. What on earth is that council doing, spending that sum of public money on a multi-storey car park? It should be being spent a bit into Sheerness, because Sheerness town centre's in a bad way. That too, a really special place that could be so much more. But even if you took 1 million for Sittingbourne and 1 million for Sheerness and invested it into the public realm, invested it with the businesses that are successful into the buildings on the high street, you end up with a fantastic environment. And then more people, more business. And then we start advertising. Come to Sittingbourne, come to Sheerness. I've always said in Queenborough, just to finish on the cockles, I've always said in Queenborough, you know what would be brilliant? You know, Whitstable's got its oyster festival. Yeah, you don't want it. Oysters are great, but you don't want it. Okay. Queenborough Cockerel Festival. There we go. In season. And we'll get all the celebrity chefs down. Yeah. And they can do pop-up food stalls where they're cooking cockles. Yeah, different recipes for different things, and just you can have a great time. But seriously, what that does is that it puts Queenborough back on the map. It will put Sittingbourne back on the map. It will put Sheerness back on the map. And that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about thinking. And already, you know, how many visitors each year come to Sittingbourne and Sheffield? Some people say it's 10,000. Some people say it's 25,000. I don't know what the right number is. Probably somewhere between that. Could be more for all I know. These are people who are coming to have a holiday here. Well, why aren't we tapping into that? Why aren't we saying to them, you know what, you're here for your summer holes? Fantastic. Spend the morning on the beach, you can all get on your bicycles along safe cycling routes to go to the town centre, or you could go to the Cockerel Festival. Yeah. And so it goes on. And I think that kind of thinking about connecting up and joining up the dots, yeah, is what we all really need now to go forward.
Yeah, turn the cameras on.